Most people assume their habits fail because they lack discipline or motivation. That framing is almost entirely wrong, and it's costing them years of restarts. The real reason habits fail is architectural. The system was never built to survive the disappearance of the initial feeling that started it. This tutorial walks through the exact mechanics of what actually makes behavior stick, not in theory, but on Tuesday evenings when you're tired, unmotivated, and no one is watching. That's the only moment any of this needs to work. Here's the core misunderstanding the entire productivity industry is built on. Motivation is treated as the ingredient that makes behavior sustainable. It isn't. Motivation is what makes behavior start. Those are completely different jobs. The moment you confuse them, you end up building a system that works only when you feel energized, which means it fails exactly when you need it most. Almost every productivity product on the market is designed to help you feel more motivated. The products aren't the problem. The premise is. The most common version of this mistake sounds like, I just need to get motivated. What that sentence actually means is, I want to feel a certain way before I act. That assumption, that action requires emotional readiness, is not just unhelpful, it's backwards. Motivation rarely precedes action. It usually follows it. You sit down to write, and the words come. You start the run, and your body remembers how to run. The feeling you were waiting for tends to show up only after you stopped waiting for it. Think of it this way. Waiting for motivation before acting is like waiting to feel thirsty before setting up a water supply. By the time the signal arrives, you're already in deficit. Action generates its own momentum. It doesn't require a prior emotional condition. Professional athletes don't train because they feel like it. They train because it's Tuesday, and Tuesday is training day. The calendar is the prerequisite. The emotion is irrelevant to the execution. This is not a discipline sermon. It's a structural observation about how behavior actually works. Willpower is often offered as the alternative to motivation. If you can't feel your way into action, force your way in. The problem is that willpower is a finite cognitive resource. It depletes across a day, across decisions, across minor social frictions. The person who gritted through 6 difficult hours has almost nothing left by evening. We shouldn't be surprised when they skip the gym and spend 2 hours on their phone. They spent everything earlier on things that required more effort than they needed to. Consistency built on willpower is a structure with no foundation. Actual consistency, the kind that holds over years, is built on 2 things: environmental design and reduced decision-making. These are inseparable. When the environment is designed correctly, the number of decisions required to do the right thing drops toward 0. Every day you have to decide whether to do the thing. You introduce a point where the answer could go either way. Mood, energy, minor inconveniences. All of it becomes a variable. The goal isn't to remove choice. It's to engineer an environment where the correct behavior requires less friction than the incorrect one. The most reliable technique for embedding a new behavior is called habit anchoring, attaching it to something you already do without thinking. Not, I will exercise more, but after I make coffee, I do 10 minutes of movement. The coffee is the anchor. The new behavior rides that anchor rather than requiring its own ignition each day. Your brain doesn't store isolated intentions. It stores chains. This context, then this behavior, then this outcome. When you link a new behavior to an existing chain, you're borrowing a neural groove that already has years of depth. You're extending something that works, not building from scratch. Once you have the anchor, the next lever is friction elimination. The gym bag by the door the night before isn't a minor organizational detail. It's the difference between a 5-second friction cost and a 5-minute one. The book on the pillow instead of across the room. The project open in a tab instead of buried in a folder. Every second of friction you remove is a decision you're making in advance on behalf of your future self, who will be tired, less certain, and looking for any reason to do the easier thing. That future self deserves the setup. Do it while you still have energy. Streaks are a legitimate tool, though their value is usually misunderstood. The point of tracking a streak is not to make the number the goal, it's to create a cost structure. Once you have 17 days in a row, missing day 18 has a concrete cost. Watching the number reset. That's not obsessive accounting. It's a small psychological mechanism that tips marginal decisions toward the right outcome on ordinary days when there's no particular reason to choose well. The streak doesn't make the habit meaningful. It makes skipping slightly more expensive at exactly the moment when the decision is closest to a coin flip. The 2-day rule follows the same logic as streaks, but it's really about how you respond to the first miss. Never miss twice. Missing once is a data point. Life happened. You were ill. The day was genuinely impossible. Missing twice is the beginning of a new pattern. The first miss is recoverable. The second miss is the start of stopping. Knowing this distinction changes everything about how you treat the first miss. Not with guilt or self-flagellation, but with a clear, calm intention to return the very next day. The streak ends. The behavior continues. Those are completely separate things. Goals have a structural flaw that doesn't get examined enough. A goal is a finish line. The moment you cross it, the motivation tied to it disappears. The person training for their first 5K often stops running the week after they finish it. There's no longer a goal, and the behavior had no other anchor. The reverse is equally damaging. When you fail to reach the goal, the behavior often stops too. Not because you can't do the thing, but because the story you were telling yourself has been falsified. The behavior was conditional on the outcome, and the outcome didn't arrive. Identity works differently. "I am a person who runs" is not a claim about performance. It doesn't expire after a bad week. It isn't canceled by a missed goal or a slow month. It simply reasserts itself. I run, so on Wednesday morning I run. The identity isn't contingent on the last outcome. Think of it like a compass rather than a target. It doesn't tell you exactly where you are, but it always tells you which direction to face. Goals orient you toward a specific destination. Identity orients you toward a way of being that doesn't require the destination to exist. Here's the key mechanism. Identity is built through evidence, not declaration. You cannot decide to have a new identity and immediately believe it. What you can do is take small, consistent actions that accumulate as evidence until the evidence is sufficient to update the belief. The belief update follows the behavior. It doesn't precede it. This is the sequence most people get backwards. They try to believe something new first, then act from it. The actual sequence is act small, stack evidence, let the identity update itself. The declaration is the output of the process, not the input. This is why starting small matters more than almost anything else in habit formation. 5 minutes of writing a day is not primarily building a writing skill. It's building a piece of evidence. I am someone who writes. Stack enough of those pieces over enough days, and the identity begins to self-reinforce. The identity then generates the behavior without requiring a fresh reason each time. The power isn't in the 5 minutes themselves. It's in what those 5 minutes say about who you are. That's the mechanism. Small actions are identity votes, and votes compound. Dramatic declarations almost never stick, and now you know why. Starting Monday, I'm completely transforming my mornings is not an identity claim. It's a performance of intention. It produces the dopamine hit of having made a decision without requiring any actual change in behavior. The real identity shift happens through repetition so small and undramatic that it barely registers. That's exactly why it holds. The brain updates beliefs based on consistent evidence, not bold announcements. An announcement without follow-through doesn't build identity. It actually erodes it, because the evidence runs in the opposite direction. None of this means motivation is worthless. It means motivation has a specific job, and that job is shorter than most people think. Motivation is genuinely useful at the beginning. When you're deciding whether to pursue something, choosing a direction, making the initial commitment. The surge of clarity when you discover something worth doing, the energy of genuine desire, the feeling of wanting something enough to start, all of that is real. Use it. The problem is treating ignition phase energy as if it should be continuously available. It was never designed to last. Its job is to get you started, not to carry you through the 1,000th repetition. The strategic move is to use the motivation while it's high to design the system that will run when it's gone. Build the anchor habit while the energy is there. Set up the environmental cues before the novelty fades. Eliminate the friction points while you still care enough to think carefully about them. This is the handoff from motivation as the driver to system as the driver. Most people miss the handoff entirely. They ride the motivation until it runs out, then wonder why the behavior stopped. The handoff is intentional. It requires recognizing that the initial energy is temporary and treating it as a construction window, not a permanent fuel source. Here's what this looks like in practice. You decide to write consistently. While you're excited about it, you choose the anchor after morning coffee. Eliminate the friction, laptop open on the desk the night before, document already loaded. Set a minimum viable version, 2 sentences counts, and apply the 2-day rule in advance by deciding now that you will never miss 2 days in a row. You do this before the excitement fades. Now the system is live. When the motivation disappears, and it will, completely, in every serious long-term practice, the system runs on its own architecture, not on how you feel. The people who sustain behavior over years are not exceptional. They are not more disciplined, more motivated, or more naturally consistent than anyone else. They built something that doesn't require them to be. The mechanics are anchor habits, friction elimination, the 2-day rule, and identity accumulated through small repeated actions. None of it is inspiring. None of it produces the feeling of a good motivational speech. It works on Tuesday evenings when you're tired, running low, and no one is watching. That is the only moment any of this needs to work. That is the whole point. The full article goes deeper into each of these mechanics, including why the 2-day rule changes how you treat failure, how to engineer identity through evidence rather than declaration, and where motivation actually belongs in a long-term system. It's a direct, no-filler read built for professionals who are tired of restarting the same habits. Find it at realsyllabus.com.